Hello, once again. Good to be with you. Have the opportunity to be in God's Word together. We are continuing with a Bible study on the topic of miracles, and hopefully, have the opportunity to dig into some of the miracles in the Bible, some better known, some lesser known, and to draw some application from that for ourselves. We'll begin with prayer, and then we'll jump into our study today. We go to our God. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for the blessings that you've given to me. Help me to see the miracles that you give in your word, the purpose for them, to help, to heal, to grow in faith. Continue to strengthen me today through the blessing of your word, that I may have that same blessing to heal, to grow, to be strengthened in faith. In Jesus' name, I ask it. Amen. Let me share our screen for today as we look at, whoops, wrong thing. Let me get back here, hit the right button. There we go. And we will get into our lesson for today. One more click here. We should be ready to go. Okay, miracles. How awesome are your deeds? We have been looking at. And to start with today, how good are you at writing thank yous? So somebody gives you something, a little gift, a little whatever it is, they give you something. How good are you at writing a thank you? Do you sit down and write a thank you immediately? Do you make a mental note to send one and then realize 3 months later you forgot, and then guilty, you quickly do it? You feel bad that you forgot. Do you know that you should, but you drag your feet and you don't? And then therefore you live in thank you guilt forever because you never actually get around to it. Is that your approach? Or maybe do you not even think about it? Do you not think about saying thank you or writing a thank you note and say, well, that's not my thing? I will leave that answer to you. I like to do number one. Otherwise, because I know number two will happen. And I'm sure I'm guilty of 3 and 4 as well. But what does that have to do with miracles? Well, today we are going to talk about a thank you kind of miracle. But just one more thought. If you had to pick someone, who might you owe a big thank you today? So as you think about your life, maybe somebody who really impacted you in some way, somebody who really kind of formed you, and maybe you never said thank you. Just kind of an interesting thought, isn't it? I might pick out, besides those that I normally think of, parents and family and people like that, probably owe a lot more thank yous than I have given out. And maybe that's true of all of us. Maybe you're much, much better at it than I am. But yeah, we probably, if we thought about it, there's a long list of people we could thank for their contributions. And I guess maybe I'm thinking maybe some teachers, some educators who really made a big impression upon me, for which I am thankful, but probably never really actually sat down and said that. So yeah, I'll leave that to you. Who might you owe a big thank you to today? Yes, to send that little note. Today we're going to study one miracle. So in the past, we've looked at a lot of different miracles. So today we're just going to look at one, and that is the healing of the 10 lepers, which is recorded in Luke chapter 17, verses 11 to 19. So you can grab your favorite Bible and look it up if you please. Otherwise, I am just going to share it on the screen in just a moment. But by the way, thinking of the Christian calendar year. So when is that Luke 17, 11 to 19, the gospel lesson? So what part of the Christian calendar year are you always going to see the healing of the 10 lepers? And the answer to that is, it's always the gospel lesson for this day. It's not a Sunday though. So there's the hint. So you can get rid of 52 of those days in the Christian calendar year. It's not a Sunday. It is a Thursday, technically. Thanksgiving is the gospel lesson for Thanksgiving, is the healing of the 10 lepers. So appropriate, as I'm doing this a week before Thanksgiving, I guess a week and a day before Thanksgiving in 2020 here. So maybe have Thanksgiving on the head a little bit already. So that's when it's used in the Christian calendar year. So here's the text itself, Luke 17, 11 to 19. I'll just read through that. Now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. So 10, okay, remember that. They stood at a distance and they called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." When he saw them, he said, "Go, show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." So a bunch of cool stuff in there. We'll touch on a few things as we go through this. First of all, the text tells us that Jesus was passing through Samaria. Samaria is always interesting to look at geography in the days of Jesus. So it's kind of the middle ground between the two places where Jesus spent most of his ministry. So Jesus spent a lot of time here, if you can see my arrow pointer, in Judea. And in Judea, you have Bethlehem, you've got Jerusalem, where Jesus was born. Excuse me. Bethlehem, where Jesus was born. You've got, did I say Jerusalem? Where he died in Jerusalem. You've got Bethany. You've got kind of borderline there between Samaria and Jerusalem is Jericho. But a lot of Jesus' ministry is spent here. The other great portion of Jesus' ministry is spent to the north, up in this region called Galilee. You hear about Galilee all the time, the Sea of Galilee. So many things happen there. The feeding of the 5,000 happened on this side. You've got Jesus where he grew up in Nazareth. So you've got Cana, you've got Capernaum, you've got Bethsaida. So much happens up here in Galilee. Well, what's right in the middle is Samaria. And it was kind of for the Jew in Jesus' day. I'm not saying for Jesus, but for the Jew in Jesus' day, it was kind of a no man's land. There are accounts of the fact that to travel through or from Judea to Galilee or back, the Jews would not go through Samaria. Maybe part of it was geography, but a big part of it was the Samaritans were kind of the undesirables in a lot of different ways. So they would go across into Perea and then up into Galilee. So why this hostility? Why this animosity? Well, a lot of this goes back to the two tribes under King David. That the one tribe, the nation of Israel, and it split off to Judah and Israel. There were so many bad kings. The Assyrians came in, the Babylonians came in. A lot of times they would settle conquered peoples, and that's what kind of happened in Samaria. So you had sort of a lot of half-breed, we would say, maybe not, that's not a very tactful term, but half Jewish background, maybe half Gentile, half something else mixed in. And so for the Jew in Jesus' day, they took great pride of, tracing their lineage back to a certain tribe. So long way of saying not friends, generally. They didn't get along. The Good Samaritan Jesus talked about, how unlikely that was in that parable for a Samaritan to help a Jew. That's just kind of the way it was. So the one is a Samaritan. So they cry out, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." Leprosy really was pitiful. There were a bunch of different types, skin diseases that we know were under the umbrella, I guess, of leprosy. But the most severe, I guess, form is what we're looking at today. So if you had this severe leprosy, it really was pitiful. So they're calling out, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. Well, as it progressed, your hair would fall out, your fingernails would fall out. Basically, your body is at war against yourself. Vocal cords were at the beginning. So it's interesting and maybe a little pathetic as you think about them calling out in a loud voice in verse 13, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. So maybe imagine 10 men calling out in a loud voice. Maybe the only way that was possible is if they all yelled together. And maybe it was a raspy voice and a bunch of weak voices joined together. So yeah, it was a horrible disease, and it left you an outcast. Leper colonies, it was communicable, so you couldn't live at home. So you were an outcast. Here's a little bit of artwork. I just saw this was interesting. So you have the 10 lepers. What's going on here? Are they healed? Are they going on their way to be healed? I don't know, but you have the one. You have one. It looks like healed, right? So looking at the hands and saying, wow, something happens. You have one who looks back, and the other 9 keep going forward in their tattered clothing and everything else. I don't know, just an interesting piece of artwork I came across. Unclean, so it was true on several levels. The law of the land made them unclean. They had to live in those leper colonies away from others, so they didn't pass it. So it was said that if you were a leper, you would have to call that out. You'd have to yell, unclean, unclean, to warn people that you were getting near to them. So that was the law of the land. Physically, you were unclean. Just think about that. Your body was decaying. Spiritually, it left you unclean. Not that leprosy was the result of sin, but remember, uncleanness could happen for a lot of different reasons. And you were spiritually unclean because of leprosy. You were not able to go to the tabernacle, to the temple. You were not able to worship with others. So spiritually, you were kind of unclean as well. And I just thought about this. What would that do to your self-esteem? You know, we make so much today about self-esteem and our being, our self, and self-awareness, all of that. Can you imagine what that would do to your idea of yourself? Yelling out unclean all the time. Imagine that today. You need to go into Walmart and you have gross. I'm gross. I'm unclean. Stay away from me. I'm icky. Don't get near to me. I'm yucky. Probably isn't totally healthy, right, for somebody's psyche. But it is what it was. They had some freedoms. As long as they stayed together in their leper colony and avoided those who were healthy. Unclean, you know, anything about having to leave family, how painful that was. You couldn't be with your spouse, you couldn't be with your children, you couldn't be with your extended family because of the disease, and you didn't want to give it to them. So as they call out to Jesus, what do you think these men are looking for in Jesus at this point? We don't have a whole ton of detailed background to it, but as they call out to Jesus, let's just go back real quickly here. On his way to Jerusalem, he's traveling along the border between Samaria and Galilee, the border between Samaria and Galilee. So Jesus maybe is in here somewhere. What are they looking for in Jesus? Well, obviously they have heard of him. They think he can do something, and maybe you know, are they calling to him because they believe in Jesus as their savior? Maybe it's possible, but maybe more likely they're calling because they have nothing to lose, right? They've heard of Jesus. He's a miracle worker, perhaps. Maybe he could help. Why not? Jesus, have pity on us. What do they call him? They don't call him Lord. They don't call him Son of God. They don't really call him by a biblical terminology for the Messiah. They call him Master. So that kind of makes me think, I don't know if faith was present there or not. Maybe it was just, we have nothing to lose. Why do you think that Jesus did not just cleanse them on the spot? So why do you think that Jesus said, go show yourselves to the priests? We're going to talk about that in just a second. Why didn't he just say, be healed, and they were healed? And with that, are there other times when Jesus made commands and the results followed later? I asked that question and then maybe realized I shouldn't have asked it because it's kind of hard to figure that out. Maybe there were some gaps, but it seems like all other miracles of Jesus, at least that I could track down, the results were pretty much immediate. The one exception I could think of was the cursing of the fig tree that happens during Holy Week. This fig did not produce figs, and Jesus used it as an example of the time is now. You should be producing fruit. And then later the disciples looked at it and it had wilted. So maybe that is one, but for the most part, I think it pretty much happens instantaneously or very soon. So here's another little exception then, a little different wrinkle on a miracle. Why do you think that Jesus did not just cleanse them immediately on the spot? Well, remember the main purpose of miracles that we've talked about in the past. And the main purpose of miracles, we said, was not just a fireworks show, was not just to go, ooh, and ah, display of Jesus' power. Generally, Jesus is trying to take them somewhere else. He's trying to take them take them to a strengthening of their faith, renewal, coming to faith, perhaps. So I guess I would think about it in those terms, that Jesus is giving them some time to recognize that the power was his, and obviously it had to come from him. Yeah, to give them the time, and maybe it seems a little strange, go help us, go show yourselves to the priests. We'll mention though why that actually makes sense, that Jesus would say that, and it wasn't just some kind of non sequitur of help us, go to the priests. That doesn't make any sense. Actually did here. If you go to Leviticus 14 in the Old Testament, the Lord said to Moses, these are the regulations for any diseased person at the time of their ceremonial cleansing when they are brought to the priest. So somebody was sick and they've gotten better. The priest is to go outside the camp and examine them. So again, separation, uncleanness, you had to be outside the camp. If they have been healed of their defiling skin disease, and then comes all the examples of offerings that needed to be made, sacrifices that needed to be made, purification that needed to take place. But who was in charge of it? It wasn't the MD, it wasn't the local doctor. It was the priest who did the cleansing. So that must have piqued their curiosity, you would think. So Jesus, Master, have pity on us. We assume, because the one gentleman is mentioned that he's a Samaritan, the assumption is made that the other 9 were Jews. Maybe they were all Samaritans. I don't know. But they're going to the priests. So that's kind of the assumption that people make. And if they knew that the priest is the one that has to do the cleansing, maybe that gets their wheels turning. Okay, something's going to happen here. We're going to the priests do the healing. Maybe something is going to happen as they went. Seems to be the picture there. 9 lepers are assumed to be Jews. Get ahead of myself sometimes. One is a Samaritan. They were a mixed race, a mixed religion, and generally at odds with the Jews. I touched on that already, the geography of Samaria. Some other examples of that, though, I think you can see in the New Testament. There is the example of Jesus being not accepted at a Samaritan village, which wasn't that uncommon. That Jesus wasn't accepted in a city. But what happened in that Samaritan village? Well, that was when James and John said, do you want us to call down fire from heaven to destroy them? You wonder if that doesn't have a little bit of a Samaritan unfriendliness behind it. I don't think there's an example of that for a Jewish village where John and James are begging for the opportunity to scorch them, scorched earth policy. So Yeah, maybe there's a little bit of resentment there. It shows a little bit of that animosity between the two. John chapter 4 is also interesting. The Samaritan woman at the well. Jesus has that fascinating conversation with this woman, asks for a drink of water. She says, "You can't, you're a Jew." Um, Jesus says, "Call your husband." She says, "I don't have a husband," on and on and on. But there's just kind of this back and forth. And she mentions it. "You're a Jew. You can't talk to me. You can't get a drink from me because of your kind of stuck up rules and your regulations." So yeah, it was a real thing, that there was, they were at odds with each other. And probably that's a mild way of putting it. I think there was some legitimate hatred at times between the two. The words of Jesus in verse 19 seem to indicate a progress of faith in the Samaritan leper. So the final verse there of verse 19, let me just go, is the last verse, and it just says, "Then he said to him, 'Rise and go, your faith has made you well.'" So one returns, the other everybody's cleansed, but one returns. And Jesus asked about the other 9. Verse 19, "Rise and go, your faith has made you well." What was his new faith in? Well, I think it's the miracle served its purpose for this man, right? What was his new faith in? That he knew who Jesus was. That the miracle displayed that Jesus is the Son of God and he does have the power. So is it faith in Jesus as just a miracle worker? Would we say that that's not true faith then? That's not saving faith? That's kind of an empty or temporary faith? I don't think so. I have no reason to doubt that this wasn't real faith. And so I would say his new faith is in the Jesus that he has come to know, the Jesus who is the Savior. So I would call that true and saving faith. Jesus even blesses those who don't thank him. So 9 of the lepers did not return their thanks. Somewhere I have a list, kind of a, I guess, a joking type list or a satirical type list of why the other 9 didn't come back and all their excuses. And I'm trying to think, I haven't looked at it for a few years, but it was something like, one of them said it was actually the priest who healed them. One said, well, Jesus didn't actually do anything, right? One said, I'm going to go see my family first. One said this and that. So all these different kind of excuses, and they never even thanked him. But Jesus blessed them anyway, right? Jesus even blesses those who don't thank him today. Examples today, well, besides ourselves, right? When we forget to thank him for all the many blessings he gives to us, right? You don't have to be a believer for Jesus to do good things. You don't have to be a Christian for Jesus to send rain upon your field, to cause your crops to grow, to have a family, to fall in love, to have friends, to have good food. You don't have to be a Christian to do all those things. So maybe we would say that's typically God, that God is gracious and God is generous even without us thanking him. And yeah, another example here. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but I'm saying it is kind of that contrast between the goodness of God and maybe the thanklessness or selfishness that we would display at times. A few things for personal application, just kind of to think about for ourselves as we think about this miracle and to kind of to chew on a little bit. Do we call out to Jesus in time of need, but pay little attention to Jesus when the crisis has passed? Yeah, I mean, that's very easy to do, right? When we find out a friend is sick, or we're sick, or a loved one, a little one, right? And suddenly we become very devout in our prayer lives. And do we, meh, when it's past, when the crisis is past, when I'm feeling better, when the sickness is gone, are we guilty too of being those 9, just wandering off and forgetting to say thank you? So I think, yeah, it's easy enough to do, isn't it? Why do we go to Jesus in time of need, but forget to return and give thanks? Why do we do that? Well, one easy, I guess the easy explanation is simply sin, right? Because we're fallen, we're sinful. But maybe we assume so much, don't we? Don't we maybe just assume that, we think God owes us something, and when he treats us like we think we deserve, well, we assume, well, sure, God wants to do that. And yeah, maybe we assume too much. Maybe we think that God owes us that. And certainly he doesn't owe us anything. He doesn't promise us any guarantees in this earthly life. The guarantees come in eternity. So yeah, again, I guess it's kind of the same thing, isn't it? Our sinful flesh likes to be selfish, and yeah, we cry out when in need, but then, yeah, maybe we think we deserve it. Maybe we assume too much. How about using this parable to actually share our faith? That's not something we've talked about yet in this class. So as far as personal application is good, but how about how do I share this information with others? What can we say to those who feel like God has not answered their prayers? So this is this is the person who had an issue and cried out to God, and maybe what they wanted didn't happen, right? And so what would you say to those who feel like God has not answered their prayers? Where would you begin? Maybe just think about maybe taking off from you'd have to be gentle about it, but why assume that God has promised us, that things are going to go our way? Maybe we're assuming a little bit too much. Maybe we're demanding almost. I think, it's easy for people to want to create God in our own image, and kind of think, well, if I were God, why wouldn't I heal somebody? If I were God, why wouldn't I answer this prayer? And we have to remember to let God be God. And even more than that, though, I think, as we struggle with that, how do we know that God loves us? What's the proof of God's love in the most clear way, the most objective way that we can show? It's not in how my life is going, because that can go up and down. And if I determine God's love that way, I'm going to be on that roller coaster constantly, right? As life goes good, God is good. As we go down the hill, God is bad. So in a way, the best thing we can do with this, I believe, is to get people to go to the cross. You want proof that God loves you? You want to see that love? Well, look at Jesus. There are hands that have nails through them and feet, and there are hands that are stretched out wide because God loved you so much. He came to pay for sin. He came to redeem you. He came to give you eternal life in heaven. Does he want the best for you now? Yes, he does. Are you always going to get the best? No, not because God isn't loving, but because this world is fallen. So rather than making God the bad guy, which we like to do so often, let's remember we live in a fallen world, and let's look at objectively what God has done. Look to the cross, look to our Savior, and there we're going to be comforted. All right. Where do you think the Samaritan went after Jesus told him to rise and go? This is one of those questions that is absolutely impossible to answer, but I'd like to know, right? I want to know. Maybe we get to ask that in eternity one day. There goes the phone. I don't think anyone's in the office, so it's going to ring for a little bit. But yeah, I'd like to think that maybe he caught up with some of the other 9 and said, hey, let's not forget about Jesus. Let's not forget. But you'd have to assume he's telling others, right? And he's excited and he's joyful. And yeah, who knows the impact that was made after Jesus. Did he keep it to himself and not tell anyone? I suppose that's possible too. But we tend to share stuff that we're excited about and that we know is good news. So I like to think that is the case that happened. Like I said, it's just kind of one of those things to think about. For personal consideration, in our final minute here, how many of your prayers are asking prayers? How many are thanking prayers? Guilty, right here. Really good at laying out all of my needs to God. Really good at asking for a lot of personal things, earthly things. How many are thanking prayers? Yeah, that's a great reminder for me. That one gets me, because so often, and God is so good in so many ways we're not even aware of, and we forget to thank Him. And even the specific things sometimes we pray for, again, we assume too much maybe. Well, I just deserve this, right? And we forget to say thanks. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just saying this is something I very much struggle with. What are some of the more important gifts for which Jesus deserves our thanks? Guess what that means? That means I'm supposed to say amen very quickly. This is my Thanksgiving question because Thanksgiving is next week. Some of the more important gifts for which Jesus deserves our thanks, I am going to leave that to you. You think about that. You think about the more important gifts for which Jesus deserves our thanks. That's your project until our next class. How about that? Finally, real quickly, what do you think the main purpose of this miracle was? As we're talking about miracles, I think the main purpose, the obvious need was to heal these people, and Jesus' heart always goes out to people, and He does that. There were times when Jesus didn't heal, but that usually seemed to be when people were putting conditions on Him, and we want you to do this for whatever reason, and it wasn't coming from faith. I think the immediate thing was to heal them physically. I do believe, though, it's that fireworks analogy again. Jesus didn't do miracles, though, just to have people go, ooh and ah. He did it for something deeper, and that was to grow in faith, to bring it to the next step. Our closing prayer today are 2 verses of a hymn from our hymnal. I think it's 520. Yes, 520 verses 1 and 2 that we'll close with this prayer. Your hand, O Lord, in days of old was strong to heal and save. It triumphed o'er disease and death, all darkness and the grave. To you they came, the blind, the dumb, the paralyzed and lame, the lepers in their misery, the sick with fevered frame. Your touch then, Lord, brought life and health, gave speech and strength and sight, and youth renewed and frenzy calmed, revealed you, Lord of light. And now, O Lord, be near to bless, almighty as before, in crowded street, by beds of pain, as by Gennesaret's shore, Galilee's shore. Until next time, God be with you, God strengthen you in His word. Thank you for the time together today. Once again, I certainly enjoyed the opportunity to share some of God's word with you. Thank you.